Good day. Welcome to another session of Fog Accountancy Tutorials. Today we are going to continue our studies on the professional and ethical responsibility of the accountant. And we have already explained the fundamental principles of ethics according to IFAC. And then we have also looked at the threat to the auditors or accountants' objectivity and independence, or the threats to the ethical principles. Now, in this video, which is the part 3 of the lesson, we are going to solve questions. Okay, I promise you that we're going to solve questions, and here we are. I'm going to begin from questions that are very light in nature to questions that are very tough in nature. And most of the time when you are going to meet questions in ethics, it's going to be more like a case study than not. You are not going to be asked straightforward questions to explain the principles. Those are for lower levels of accountancy. Now, in the higher levels of accountancy, most of the time there will be a case where an accountant is expected to act in a particular way to be able to uphold the ethics of the profession, but is faced with a dilemma or faced with a situation that is pressing on the accountant to act in an unethical manner. And when that happens, you'll be expected in the exam to be able to tell us what the accountant will do. Normally, the first thing you'll be required to do is to be able to identify the ethical issues that are in the case study that you have been given. So once you're able to raise the ethical issues and then talk about them, then you'll be asked to direct as to how the accountant or the auditor should act in order not to breach the code of ethics of the profession. So that is basically what the question and answer session is going to be. So I'm going to begin from a very basic question to a more difficult question. So let us not waste much time. Let's begin by looking at this very simple question of ethics. It's a very simple question that is asking us of the importance of ethics. Now, good ethical behavior may be above that required by law. In a highly competitive, complex business world, it is essential that professional accountants sustain their integrity and remember the trust and confidence which is placed in them by whosoever relies on their objectivity and professionalism. Required. Explain why the code of ethics is important to professional accountants in Ghana. So here, the question has made it specific in Ghana. But if you are watching me from any other country apart from Ghana, it doesn't mean that there is a different thing that will apply to your country. I mean, basically, we want you to tell us the importance of ethics, whether in Ghana or Nigeria or Kenya or wherever that you are watching me from. Ethical principles are standardized by IFAC and is applicable all over the world. Now, look at the requirements of the question again. Explain why the code of ethics is important to professional accountants in Ghana. So we are going to look at the solutions and discuss them together. Okay, why are ethics important? So let's quickly look at the answer on our screen. So here you are required to give us the importance of ethics. And so this will be your solution. 1. The code of ethics relates to fairness, honesty, and responsibility. Now, you are telling us that ethics are important because they relate to fairness, honesty, and responsibility. So that is the first thing. I mean, this is a very basic. I told you I'm starting from very basic questions to more complex. And this is a question of knowledge. This is not a question of application. So let's quickly go through this and take another one. So second point, ethics are a set of moral principles to guide behavior. So that makes it very important because they are moral principles that uphold morality in the discharge of your duties as an accountant. And then the third point, they guide accountants to perform their work properly. So ethics will make sure that accountants' work is being done properly and not haphazardly. All right. And then the next one, ethics describe how an accountant does his work and not what he does. If an accountant carries out his work with bad faith, it can affect the accountant who may be disciplined by the ICAG. Now, ICAG is the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana. So in Nigeria, you have ICAN, Institute of Chartered Accountants in Nigeria, and then you have CPA for Kenya. The CASNEB is in charge of that as well. And all over the world where you are watching me from, you should understand that once you belong to a professional body in your country, if you do not act in an ethical way, it doesn't speak well of you, and you may be even disciplined by the body that regulates your license as an accountant. So it's very important that as an accountant, you act in an ethical way. So we are saying that ethics describe how an accountant does his work and not what he does. So that is important. Now, the last point is that improper conduct can also have an effect on the business as a whole. You understand? So if you are working for any company and you do not act in an ethical manner, it's going to keep the image of the entire business down, or it can even cost some financial loss to the business in which you are having that oversight responsibility as an accountant. So, I mean, the list is inexhaustive. You can add more and more and more from your notes or from your thoughts, how you understand. But all that this question was requiring from you was knowledge. Just put the knowledge down that what are the importance of the ethical principles to an accountant. So as far as you and I are concerned, we can think about so many points, okay, that are important to why we need the code of ethics in our profession as accountants. So that is it with the first question. I'm not going to take too much of your time. All right. Okay. Now let's look at the second question. Okay. The second question is not a knowledge-based question. It is an application-based question, but it's not so much detailed. So we're going to begin with that, and then we'll zoom to a much more detailed application question. Now, in this question, it's a simple case where you are supposed to apply your knowledge on ethics to advise or tell what should have been done by the accountant. So let's look at it, and I'm sure we'll understand it by reading the question. Question 2. You work for a large company as assistant financial controller. One of your duties is to reconcile the sales ledger each month. Every month, it does not agree, and you feel sure it is associated with bad debts being written off on the individual customer's account, but not included in the nominal ledger. You consider the differences to be material and have brought this to the attention of the financial controller, but he seems unwilling to act. Required. What action would you take in this situation? What action would you take in this situation? And this is a 5-mark question. Now, let me explain the question to you very well so that you understand the case here. You are an accountant, or let's say an assistant financial controller, meaning you have a boss who is the main financial controller. Now, as part of your duties as the assistant financial controller, you are supposed to do a reconciliation of the sales ledger accounts. And in doing so, you find out that it is never agreeing. You don't have a correct balance when you are doing the reconciliation. Why? Because there are some bad debts that are written off from the sales ledger, from individual debtors' accounts, but there is no corresponding entry in the nominal ledger. You know that in order to write off bad debts, the double entry is that you debit your bad debt or irrecoverable debt account. Okay, your bad debt or irrecoverable debt account. Now, you debit that account and then you credit the individual debtors account so that you reduce the receivables balance. So this is the correct procedure for writing off any bad debt or any recoverable debt. You debit the recoverable debt account and then you credit. Now, in crediting the debtors account means you are reducing the receivables balance on the debtors account. Okay, and you see, let's assume that this is the receivables or debtors account. Now, what I'm doing, you are not going to do it in your answer. Ethics does not require the preparation of accounts. All that you need to do is to first understand the principles before you can know how to advise or what to do. I'm just trying to help you understand the scenario That is why I'm creating this account. So please, I'm not yet solving the question. I just want you to follow, because even the question of ethics, you need your knowledge of your accounting principles to be able to understand the question of ethics. Now, in order to write off bad debt, it is your receivables or debtors account, and then you also open the bad debt or recoverable debt account. Now, the interesting thing is that from the way they have stated it, if you don't understand your ledgers very well, the knowledge of your ledgers is weak, you would be confused at a point, because we are told that, let's go back to the question and see something. You are told every month it does not agree, and you feel sure it is associated with bad debts being written off on the individual customer account, but not included in a nominal ledger. Now, let me explain to you. This individual customer's account is a receivables account. So this one is a customer's account, which we also call the receivables account. Okay, now the individual customer's account will be found or located in the sales ledger. Okay, so these are two ledgers. The sales ledger harbors this account, and then the nominal ledger harbors the bad debt account. So the nominal ledger is a ledger for mostly income and expenses, and the sales ledger keeps account of the customers or the credit customers, the debtors. So these two accounts are not in the same ledger. This one is in the sales ledger, this one is in the nominal ledger. So if you have a bad debt of, let's say, 200 cedis to be written off, let's assume that you have a debtor's balance of 1,000 in this account, and you want to write off 200. You are going to credit this account with 200 in the name of bad debt or recoverable debt, so that the corresponding entry will come into the bad debt account as 200 in the name of the receivables or the customer. So what it means is that, in effect, you have reduced this debt of 1,000 to 800, because that is what is going to be the balance on the account at the end. Now, what we are saying is that in this question, he usually doesn't get the balance on reconciliation, because anytime they write off bad debt, they don't transfer it into the nominal account. Transferring it into the nominal account means that they don't put it in the bad debt account. So this account doesn't exist. Meanwhile, they keep on writing. So it is more or less like practicing a single entry system. Okay, now what makes it more critical is that the amount of bad debt they are writing off is very material. And materiality is relative. I've told you before that what can be material for one company can be immaterial to another organization, depending on the financial values on the statement of income and whatever. So what we are trying to say is that the amount of money they keep writing off is very material, huge amount of money in relative to the company's cash flows. Okay, but they don't show the corresponding entries, and it is very worrying, because it's going to cause an auditor to give a qualified opinion on the financial statement of the organization. And as an accountant or an assistant financial controller, you know that this is ethically very wrong. There is something wrong here ethically, and we have gone through 5 principles with the ethics: integrity, objectivity, professional competence, and due care, professional behavior, and then confidentiality. And it is breaching one or more of these ethical principles. So when you are asked, look at the requirement, what action would you take in this situation? We expect you to apply your knowledge. You are restricted to the ethics. Okay, so look at the ethical issues involved and pick them up. If you see a breach of any of the ethical principles that I have mentioned, that is what you are going to raise as your answer. And you talk about how they have been breached. And then after you have spoken about the ethical principles, then you also come again to tell us how you are going to react in order not to continue breaching the ethical principles. So that is basically normally how it comes. This is a very simple case, because after this I'm going to look at another question which is quite a longer case. Okay, and we'll see the ethical issues that we are going to identify. So let's begin to identify which ethical principles that are being violated here by the controller. Okay, so let's read the question again. You work for a large company as an assistant financial controller. One of your duties is to reconcile the sales ledger each month. Every month, it does not agree, and you feel sure it is associated with bad debts being written off on the individual customer's account, but not included in the nominal ledger. You consider the difference to be material, and have brought this to the attention of the financial controller, but he seems unwilling to act. That is where the problem is coming from. It could have been a genuine mistake. So if after bringing it to the attention of the controller, he was willing to act, that would have been an easy situation. I mean, they wouldn't have breached any ethical principle. But the moment the financial controller is unwilling to act, then probably he may have an idea of what is going on. And it could be as a result of some form of creative accounting. I don't know. Usually, I advise my students that you don't become so specific when the question hasn't become so clear on a point. But however, I mean, you could understand that he knows what is going on and he's not willing to act for a purpose. And therefore, you have to deassociate yourself from that mess as an assistant financial controller to prove that you respect the ethics of our profession. Okay? So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the solution. But the two main ethical issues that I identify here personally is integrity. I mean, there is an issue of integrity here with the financial controller. And then also there is an issue of objectivity. So integrity is lost here. And then there is no objectivity with the financial controller. I mean, he's being biased. I don't know why he has to leave out the bad debt account from the nominal ledger. That is being biased. That is not being objective. It's a breach of objectivity. And also, in order to know, I mean, let's assume that you were doing it and you thought it has not come to the notice of anyone. Now your assistant has identified and have told you, and you are still unwilling to act. That is a lack of integrity, because integrity has to do with honesty and being straightforward, being fair and honest in your dealings as an accountant. So I don't want to waste your time. I mean, I have done a lot of analysis, but I want to project the solution on your screen so that we'll all look at it. So look at the solution here. Now, the first one is that the main ethical issue here is integrity. It will not be appropriate for an accountant to assist someone with a potential fraudulent act or allow misleading information to be presented to others. You understand? So the accountant does not have integrity. That is the first point. Before I tell you the second point here, you see that, go back to the question and see. Now the question says you work for a large company as an assistant financial controller, and the requirement says what action would you take? So you are answering it as yourself, who is the assistant financial controller. You are not looking at it from the side of the controller. I just want to clarify that. So going back to the solution, we said that the first issue is integrity. You need to act very well not to breach integrity. And the second one is that there is also a potential issue of objectivity. If only you are placed under pressure by the financial controller, this will mean you have a conflict of interest between what your boss requires and how you also have to behave with integrity. So now, you can also be under pressure by your boss to also accept and do things the way he wants it. And in that case, there is that conflict of interest between what you know to be right and then what your boss wants you to do. And if you also oblige, then you are not acting objectively. So that is it. So the question is, after telling us, you see, in answering every case study, listen, in answering every case study of ethics, you always have to first raise the main ethical principles that you can identify there and you talk about. But that is not all. After you have mentioned the ethical principles, like in this case, we have mentioned integrity and objectivity, then you go ahead to tell the possible actions that you will take in this situation. So let's further look at what is next. Now, the possible actions to take is that, one, informing the financial controller, audit committee, or board of directors, and formally asking the financial controller to address the issue. So when you think it is going beyond you as an assistant financial controller, you can approach the board members or go to the audit committee members of the organization, part of the board, and then tell them that this and that is what is happening. You want it to be addressed, but your boss says no. I mean, you are acting and you are informing within the organization. But take note that if you take the information outside to begin to spread to the outside world that this is what your boss is doing, even though you have the right mind to correct the thing, you'll be breaching the principle of confidentiality, because such information relates to your organization and should not be sold out to the world. So even though you may be right, but disclosing such an information to third parties outside the organization is a breach of another ethical principle called confidentiality. So you need to be very careful. So you see that the first point is that you are informing the board of directors and the audit committee, who are also part of the organization. So that is not about a breach of confidentiality. Okay, then look at another thing you can do. Informing the financial controller that you are going to bring the matter to the attention of the financial director or audit committee. So you see, even though you are going to tell the audit committee, sometimes it's important to first of all warn your. So let's say that these two answers should have been in a different order. The first thing is to tell the financial controller that no, if he is not willing to act with integrity, then you are going to inform the directors or the audit committee. Now, in that case, you may be faced with another ethical dilemma, because it's likely that if it is something fishy he's doing, he can attempt to bribe you or do something. So in that case, you also be faced with another dilemma to act with integrity and professionalism. Now, after warning him that you want to inform them, if he still does not agree, you go ahead to inform the audit committee. And then let's look at another step that you can take. Now, okay, so the last step is what I was saying earlier. It will not be advisable to report externally until legal advice has been taken. Hopefully, this situation can be resolved with one of the above actions. All right, so it's not advisable to report externally except you have a legal mandate. If not, you'll be breaching the principle of confidentiality. So this is a very simple question, but look at how complex the solution is. You need to first of all mention the ethical principles, then afterwards you mention possible actions. And please listen to me. That is how it will be with every question on ethics. I repeat, anytime you have a question on ethics, you always have to identify any of the 5 ethical principles you identify from the case. Talk about them. But when you are done, never forget to write the possible actions to take. That is the practical actions you are going to take. So in the next question that is very complex that I'm going to take with you, you are still going to look at a very long case. Then we are going to identify all the ethical principles among the 5. Talk about them separately. When we are done, again, we'll look at the practical steps to take in order to curb and solve the situation. So this one will bring us to the end of a very short video on ethics. Now, in the next video, we are going to look at a very long question, and then we'll help ourselves to better be in a position to answer very complex questions. Remember to subscribe to this channel if it is your first time. Share this video and let others also have a benefit. And until we meet again for the next lesson, it's bye for now. Thank you.